The eviction notice felt like ice in Brianna Thompson's hands, even though the late afternoon sun streamed through her small apartment window. 3 days. She had 3 days to find a new place to live, pack up 4 years of memories, and somehow come up with double the rent money her landlord now demanded. The paper crinkled as her hands trembled, and she read the words again, hoping they might magically change. They didn't. Brianna set the notice on her worn kitchen counter and pressed her palms against the cool surface, willing herself not to cry. At 28 years old, she'd worked so hard to build a stable life. She taught preschool at Sunshine Learning Center, where 20 energetic 4-year-olds called her Miss Bree and drew her crayon pictures that she treasured more than gold. She volunteered at the community center on weekends. She paid her bills on time, kept her small apartment spotless, and saved what little she could each month. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough in a city where rent prices climbed higher every year while teacher salaries stayed frozen in place. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and she glanced at the unknown number flashing on the screen. Normally she wouldn't answer, but something made her pick up. Maybe she hoped it was a miracle. Maybe she was just too drained to care anymore. Hello? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Hi. Is this Miss Bree? A small voice, high and sweet, came through the speaker. Brianna's eyebrows drew together. This is Brianna Thompson. Who's calling, sweetie? I'm Sophie. I'm 6 years old and I need your help. The little girl's voice carried such earnest desperation that Brianna's heart clenched. My daddy is so lonely and I heard him crying in his room last night. I don't know what to do. Please, can you help him? Can you come meet him? Please? Sophie, honey, I think you might have the wrong number, Brianna said gently, even as her own problems pressed down on her shoulders. I don't know your daddy. But you sound nice. You called me sweetie and honey just like my mommy used to. Sophie's voice cracked slightly. My mommy died 2 years ago and daddy tries to be happy, but I know he's sad. He works all the time and when he's home he just stares at pictures. I want him to smile again. Real smiles, not pretend ones. Brianna's throat tightened. She knew about loss, about loneliness, about the weight of carrying on when everything felt impossible. Her own father had passed away 5 years ago, and her mother still lived in their small hometown 3 hours away, struggling with her own grief and medical bills that Brianna helped pay when she could. Sophie, I'm so sorry about your mommy, Brianna said softly, sinking into one of her mismatched kitchen chairs. But I don't think I'm the right person to help. I'm just a preschool teacher and I don't even know your daddy's name. His name is Andrew Mitchell and he's really nice. He reads me stories every night and makes the best pancakes and he always helps people. He built a whole hospital for kids who are sick. But he won't help himself be happy. Sophie's words tumbled out in a rush. I found your number in his phone. Well, I was looking through his contacts and I just picked one that sounded pretty. Brianna is a pretty name. Despite everything weighing on her, Brianna felt a small smile tug at her lips. This child was clearly desperate to help her father, even if her methods were a bit unusual. But Andrew Mitchell? The name sounded vaguely familiar, like something she might have heard on the news. That's very sweet of you, Sophie, but grown-ups are complicated. Your daddy probably just needs time to heal. Grief doesn't go away quickly. It's been 2 whole years, Sophie insisted. That's 730 days. I counted. And I have a birthday party this Saturday. Will you come? Please? I don't have a lot of friends because we just moved here, and Daddy said I could invite whoever I wanted. I want to invite you. And then you can meet Daddy and maybe you can be friends and then maybe he won't be lonely anymore. Brianna opened her mouth to decline, to explain that she had her own crisis to deal with, that she couldn't just show up at a stranger's house. But then she looked at the eviction notice on her counter, at the small, tidy apartment that would soon belong to someone else, at the life she'd built that was crumbling around her. What did she have to lose? What time is your party, Sophie? The little girl's squeal of delight was so pure, so full of hope, that Brianna felt tears finally slip down her cheeks. At least she could make one person happy this week, even if her own world was falling apart. 2 o'clock at my house. I'll text you the address from Daddy's phone. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. You're going to love my daddy, I just know it. He's the best daddy in the whole world. After Sophie hung up, promising to send the details, Brianna sat in her quiet apartment as the sun began to set. She looked at her reflection in the darkening window, a beautiful young woman with warm brown skin, natural curls pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing her favorite emerald green cardigan over jeans. She looked tired. She looked scared. But maybe, just maybe, she could help a lonely little girl and her grieving father, even if she couldn't help herself. Her phone buzzed with a text message containing an address in Meadowbrook Estates, the most expensive neighborhood in the city. Brianna's eyes widened. Andrew Mitchell wasn't just any father. He was wealthy, possibly very wealthy if he lived there. She thought about her eviction notice, her uncertain future, and the kindness in Sophie's voice. What would happen Saturday? Would this Andrew Mitchell be angry that his daughter had randomly called a stranger? Would he think Brianna was trying to take advantage of a child's innocence? Brianna didn't know. But she'd given her word to a 6-year-old who'd lost her mother, and she wouldn't break that promise. No matter what happened, she would show up at that party and make Sophie's day special. Sometimes, she thought, you just have to have faith that things will work out, even when every logical sign points the other way. Have you ever received a call that changed your entire life? What would you do if a stranger's child reached out to you in their moment of need? Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to see how Brianna's decision transforms not just her life, but the lives of a lonely father and his precious daughter. Will kindness lead to something more? Andrew Mitchell stared at his phone in complete confusion. The call had disconnected 5 minutes ago, but he was still processing what his assistant had just told him. Apparently, during his conference call with the Tokyo investors, his daughter Sophie had somehow gotten hold of his personal phone and called a random number. Sophie Grace Mitchell, he called out, using her full name in the way that let her know he was serious but not angry. The patter of small feet echoed through the marble hallway of their home, and his daughter appeared in the doorway of his study, her brown curls bouncing, her blue eyes wide with a mixture of guilt and defiance. She wore her favorite bright red dress with white polka dots, the one she insisted on wearing at least twice a week. Yes, Daddy? She clasped her hands behind her back in a way that reminded him so painfully of her mother that his heart clenched. Did you take my phone during my call? He kept his voice gentle. Discipline was important, but so was understanding why his normally well-behaved daughter had done something so out of character. Sophie's lower lip trembled, but she nodded. I'm sorry, Daddy. But I had to. Had to. Sophie, that was a very important call with people from Japan. Why would you have to take my phone? Andrew leaned back in his leather chair, studying his daughter's face. She looked determined, not mischievous. Something was bothering her. Because you're lonely. The words burst out of her like water from a broken dam. I heard you crying last night, Daddy. I got up to get water and I heard you in your room and you were crying and looking at pictures of Mommy. And I know you miss her. I miss her too so much. But Mommy wouldn't want you to be sad forever. She told me before she went to heaven that I had to take care of you. Andrew's chest tightened. He'd thought he'd been quiet last night, that Sophie hadn't heard him in his moment of weakness. The second anniversary of his wife Caroline's death had been last week, and some nights the grief still hit him like a wave, dragging him under when he least expected it. Oh, sweetheart. He held out his arms and Sophie ran to him, climbing into his lap like she used to when she was smaller. At 6 years old she was getting too big for this, but he needed it as much as she did. I'm okay. I promise. Sometimes grown-ups just need to feel sad for a little bit so they can feel better later. But you're sad a lot, Daddy. And you work all the time. And we don't go to the park anymore or have movie nights or make cookies. Sophie's voice muffled against his chest. And I thought, maybe if you had a friend, a special friend like Mommy was, maybe you could be happy again. Andrew pulled back to look at his daughter's earnest face. So you called a random number from my phone? Not random. Sophie shook her head seriously. I looked through your contacts and I found a name that sounded nice. Brianna. And when she answered, she did sound nice, Daddy. She called me sweetie and honey, and she was kind even though she didn't know me. And I invited her to my birthday party on Saturday. You did what? Andrew felt his eyes widen. Sophie, you can't just invite strangers to your party. I don't even know who this woman is. She could be anyone. But she said yes. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. She said she would come because I asked her to. She kept trying to say no, but I could tell she didn't really want to say no. She sounded sad too, Daddy. Maybe she needs a friend as much as you do. Andrew ran his hand over his face trying to think. His security team would have a fit if a stranger showed up at Sophie's party without being vetted first. But looking at his daughter's hopeful face, he couldn't bring himself to simply call this Brianna woman and uninvite her. Sophie had been so withdrawn since Caroline's death, so quiet and careful, trying so hard to be good and not cause trouble. This was the first time in months he'd seen real fire in her eyes, real hope. Okay, he said finally. She can come to the party. But I need to talk to her first, make sure she understands this was all your idea, not some kind of setup. What's her name again? Brianna Thompson. I sent her our address from your phone. Sophie bit her lip. Are you mad at me? No, baby girl. I'm not mad. I'm just worried. There are people in the world who might try to take advantage of a situation like this. But we'll figure it out. He kissed the top of her head. And Sophie? Thank you for caring about me. But you don't have to find me a friend or a girlfriend or anything like that. You're enough for me. You and Grandma Rose and our life together, that's enough. But Daddy, everybody needs more than enough. Mommy used to say that. She said we should always have room in our hearts for more love, more friends, more happiness. Sophie looked up at him with Caroline's eyes, and Andrew felt his resolve crumble a little more. She was right. Caroline had said that, had lived that. His late wife had been the most open-hearted person he'd ever known, always ready to help someone, always seeing the best in people. She would have laughed at this situation and probably invited Brianna Thompson to dinner just to see what happened. All right, Andrew said, pulling out his phone. Give me a few minutes to call Miss Thompson and explain the situation. And Sophie? No more matchmaking, okay? If I'm going to meet someone new someday, it needs to happen naturally, not because my 6-year-old daughter is playing Cupid. Sophie nodded, but Andrew saw the small smile on her face as she skipped out of his study. He shook his head, torn between exasperation and love. His daughter was growing up, becoming more like Caroline every day. He found Brianna Thompson's number in his recent calls and dialed, preparing himself for an awkward conversation. The phone rang 3 times before a warm, slightly cautious voice answered. Hello? Miss Thompson? This is Andrew Mitchell, Sophie's father. I need to apologize for my daughter's phone call earlier. She took my phone without permission and, well, I understand she invited you to her birthday party this Saturday. There was a pause, and he could hear the rustling of papers in the background. When Brianna spoke again, her voice carried a mixture of kindness and uncertainty. Mr. Mitchell, I appreciate you calling. I was wondering if I should actually show up or if it was all some kind of mistake. Your daughter is very sweet, but I understand if you'd prefer I didn't come. I'm a complete stranger. That's exactly the problem, Andrew said, but he softened his tone. I don't know anything about you, and while I trust that Sophie has good instincts, I have to be careful. I'm sure you understand. Of course. Brianna's voice warmed with understanding. I'm a preschool teacher at Sunshine Learning Center. I've been teaching there for 6 years. I have a clean background check which is required for my job. I can provide references if you'd like. I promise, I'm not trying to take advantage of your daughter's kindness or your situation. She just sounded so earnest and I have a soft spot for kids. Andrew found himself relaxing slightly. There was something genuine in her voice, something honest and open. A preschool teacher? Yes. I work with 4-year-olds mostly. 20 of them in one classroom, which means I'm either very patient or slightly crazy. She gave a small laugh, and Andrew found himself smiling despite his concerns. Probably both, he said. Then, making a decision that surprised him, he continued, Look, Miss Thompson, I know this is an unusual situation. But my daughter has been through a lot in the past 2 years. Her mother, my wife, passed away from cancer. Sophie's been so quiet, so withdrawn. This is the first time I've seen her really excited about something in a long time. If you're willing to come to the party, I'd appreciate it. But I'd also like to meet you first, just to make sure we're all on the same page. I'm so sorry for your loss, Brianna said softly, and Andrew could hear the genuine sympathy in her voice. Both of you have been through something terrible. I'd be happy to meet you first. And Mr. Mitchell? I lost my father 5 years ago. I understand a little bit about grief, about trying to move forward while honoring someone's memory. I won't pretend to know what you're going through, but I do know that Sophie reaching out like that took courage. She's worried about you. Andrew felt his throat tighten. I know. I just want her to be able to be a kid, not worry about her father's emotional state. Kids are more perceptive than we give them credit for, Brianna said. But maybe coming to the party can just be about celebrating Sophie, helping her have a good day. It doesn't have to be about anything else. That sounds perfect, Andrew said and meant it. How about we meet for coffee tomorrow? Just briefly so we can put faces to voices before the party. I'd like that, Brianna agreed. There's a cafe called Morning Brew on Maple Street. Would 10 o'clock work? I'll be there, Andrew promised. They exchanged a few more details before hanging up, and Andrew sat in his study for a long moment, thinking about the day's unexpected turn. Maybe Sophie's matchmaking attempt was misguided, but at least the woman his daughter had randomly called seemed kind and genuine. He could give her a chance for Sophie's sake. What Andrew didn't know was that Brianna Thompson had her own reasons for accepting Sophie's invitation. Reasons that had nothing to do with matchmaking and everything to do with having nowhere else to go in 3 days. But sometimes, desperate circumstances led to unexpected blessings. And sometimes a 6-year-old girl's hope could change more lives than anyone imagined. The Morning Brew Cafe was everything Brianna needed that Friday morning. Quiet, comfortable, and blessedly free of judgment. She arrived 10 minutes early, wearing her best royal blue dress, the one she saved for parent-teacher conferences and important occasions. Her natural curls were styled neatly, and she'd taken extra care with her appearance, though she wasn't entirely sure why this meeting felt so important. Maybe because in less than 48 hours she'd officially be homeless. She'd spent the evening packing her belongings into boxes borrowed from the grocery store, trying not to think about where those boxes would go. Her mother had offered to let her move back home, but that small house was already overcrowded with medical equipment for her mother's diabetes care. Brianna's younger brother still lived there, commuting to community college. There simply wasn't room. The cafe door opened and Brianna knew immediately it was Andrew Mitchell. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair showing hints of gray at the temples. He wore charcoal slacks and a crisp white dress shirt, no tie, looking professional but approachable. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Deep brown, intelligent, but carrying a weight of sadness that made her heart ache. He spotted her, and his expression shifted to something warmer, more open. He walked over, extending his hand. "Miss Thompson? Please call me Brianna." She shook his hand, noting his firm but gentle grip. "And you must be Andrew." "I am." He settled into the chair across from her, and a server appeared almost immediately to take their order. Once they both had coffee in front of them, Andrew studied her face. "Thank you for meeting me. I know this whole situation is strange." "Strange is one word for it," Brianna agreed with a small smile. "But your daughter is incredibly sweet. The way she talked about you, the love in her voice, I couldn't say no to her." Andrew's expression softened at the mention of Sophie. "She's my whole world. Everything I do is for her. After Caroline, my wife, passed away, Sophie became so quiet. She was only 4 years old, too young to lose her mother. I've tried therapy, support groups, special activities, but nothing seemed to reach her. Until yesterday, when she apparently decided to take matters into her own hands." "She's worried about you," Brianna said gently. "She told me she heard you crying." Andrew winced. "I thought I was being quiet. The anniversary of Caroline's death was last week, and some days are harder than others. But I never wanted Sophie to feel responsible for my happiness. She should be playing with dolls and worrying about princess movies, not about her father's emotional well-being. With respect, Mr. Mitchell." "Andrew, please." "Andrew," Brianna corrected herself. "Children who've experienced loss grow up faster than we'd like. They become attuned to the emotions of the people they love because they're terrified of losing anyone else. Sophie isn't trying to be a parent. She's trying to make sure you're okay because you're all she has left." Andrew was quiet for a moment, his fingers wrapped around his coffee cup. When he spoke again, his voice was rougher. "You said you lost your father. How old were you?" 23. "I was in my last year of college, student teaching, when he had a heart attack. It was sudden, unexpected. One day he was there and the next he was gone." Brianna took a sip of her coffee, the familiar ache of loss settling in her chest. "My mother fell apart. I had to come home, help with arrangements, bills, everything. It changed the trajectory of my life, but it also taught me that grief doesn't follow a timeline. Sometimes you're fine and sometimes you're not. That's okay." "How did you move forward?" "I'm not sure I have, not completely. But I keep going. I teach, I volunteer, I try to make each day count." She didn't mention the eviction notice, the fact that her forward motion had just hit a wall. This wasn't about her problems. Your daughter reaching out like that shows incredible courage. She's not giving up on happiness, on family, on love. That's a beautiful thing. Andrew met her eyes, and Brianna saw something shift in his expression, a crack in the careful walls he'd built around himself. "You're right. Caroline would have loved Sophie's attempt at matchmaking. She was always trying to set up our single friends, convinced that everyone deserved to find love. She sounds wonderful." She was. Andrew pulled out his phone and showed Brianna a picture. A beautiful woman with warm eyes and Sophie's curly brown hair, laughing at something off camera. She was a nurse. She loved helping people. When she got sick, she fought so hard, not for herself but for Sophie. She wanted to see her grow up. "I'm so sorry she didn't get to," Brianna said softly. "But Sophie is growing up beautifully, in part because you're honoring Caroline's memory by being a good father." They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily from parenting philosophies to favorite books to the challenges of balancing work and life. Andrew told her about his company, Mitchell Industries, which developed medical technology and had recently opened a children's hospital wing. Brianna told him about her students, the joy of watching 4-year-olds discover the world. What she didn't tell him was that she might not have a classroom to return to after this weekend, that she was facing homelessness, that her carefully constructed life was crumbling. Those were her problems to solve, not his. When they finally stood to leave, Andrew walked her to her car, an older sedan that had seen better days. "I'm glad we met," he said. "You're exactly the kind of person I'd want Sophie to look up to. The party starts at 2 tomorrow. Don't bring a gift. Just bring yourself." "I'll be there," Brianna promised, and she meant it. Saturday arrived with perfect weather, sunny but not too hot. Brianna drove to Meadowbrook Estates, her stomach fluttering with nerves. The houses in this neighborhood weren't just big. They were mansions, each one more impressive than the last. When she pulled up to the Mitchell home, her hands tightened on the steering wheel. The house was beautiful, pale stone with tall windows, a circular driveway with a fountain in the center, and manicured gardens that looked like something from a magazine. For a moment, Brianna considered driving away. What was she doing here? She was a preschool teacher who couldn't even afford her rent. She didn't belong in a place like this. But then she saw Sophie standing at the front door, wearing a bright yellow birthday dress, her face pressed against the glass as she watched for arrivals. When Sophie spotted Brianna's car, her whole face lit up, and she started waving frantically. Brianna couldn't leave now. She parked, grabbed the small gift bag she'd brought despite Andrew's instructions, not to bring anything, and walked up the path. Before she could ring the bell, Sophie burst through the door. "You came. You really came." Sophie grabbed Brianna's hand. "I told Daddy you would, but I was worried maybe you wouldn't. Come in, come in. I want to show you everything." The inside of the house was even more impressive than the outside, but Brianna didn't have time to look around because Sophie was pulling her through rooms, chattering excitedly about her party plans. Other children were starting to arrive, most of them from Sophie's new school, along with their parents. Andrew appeared, wearing dark jeans and a green button-down shirt that made him look more relaxed than he had at the cafe. When he saw Brianna, relief crossed his face. "You made it?" "Sophie's been watching the window for the past hour." "I wouldn't miss it," Brianna said, handing him the gift bag. "I know you said no gifts, but I'm a teacher. I can't show up to a 6-year-old's party empty-handed. It's just a book." Andrew peeked inside and smiled. Charlotte's Web. One of Caroline's favorites. She read it to Sophie when she was in the hospital. His voice roughened slightly. "Thank you. This is perfect." The party was chaos in the best way, children running through the backyard playing games, eating cake, laughing. Brianna found herself naturally gravitating toward the kids, helping organize activities, wiping tears when someone fell, settling disputes over toys. She didn't even realize she was doing it until she looked up and saw Andrew watching her, an unreadable expression on his face. Later, when most of the guests had left and Sophie was opening presents with a few close family friends, Andrew pulled Brianna aside into the quiet of his study. "You're a natural with kids," he said. "Sophie told me she wants you to come to every party from now on." "She's easy to love," Brianna said honestly. "She's bright, kind, and so full of hope despite everything she's been through." Andrew hesitated, then said, "At the cafe yesterday, I got the sense there was something you weren't telling me. You seemed distracted, worried. Is everything okay?" Brianna debated lying, keeping her problems to herself. But there was something in Andrew's eyes, a genuine concern that made her defenses crumble. "I'm being evicted," she said quietly. "My landlord doubled my rent with 3 days' notice, which I'm pretty sure isn't legal, but I can't afford a lawyer to fight it. I have until Monday to be out of my apartment." Andrew's expression shifted to immediate concern. "Where will you go?" "I'm not sure yet. I've been looking at places, but everything in my price range is either too far from my school or in neighborhoods that aren't safe. I might have to move in with my mother temporarily, but she's 3 hours away and I'd lose my job." Brianna felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "I'm sorry. This isn't your problem. I shouldn't have said anything." "Stop." Andrew's voice was firm but kind. "Don't apologize for struggling. Life is hard, and sometimes circumstances overwhelm us through no fault of our own." He pulled out his phone. "I have connections with several real estate companies in the city. Let me make some calls. There has to be something available that's affordable and safe." "Mr. Mitchell, Andrew, I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. I'm offering. And before you refuse, think about Sophie. She's become attached to you in just one day. If you move 3 hours away, she'll be heartbroken. So let me help. Not as some kind of charity, but as a friend helping a friend. Caroline taught me that we're supposed to help each other. That's what makes us human. Brianna wanted to refuse on principle, wanted to insist she could handle it herself. But the truth was she couldn't. She was drowning, and Andrew Mitchell was offering her a life raft. Pride wouldn't keep a roof over her head. Okay, she said softly. Thank you. I accept your help with gratitude. Andrew smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, it reached his eyes. Good. Give me until Monday. I'll find you something. As Brianna left the party that evening, Sophie hugging her goodbye and making her promise to visit again, she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks: hope. Maybe accepting help wasn't weakness. Maybe it was just acknowledging that we all need each other sometimes. And maybe, just maybe, Sophie's random phone call had been exactly what both Brianna and Andrew needed, even if neither of them realized it yet. Sophie Mitchell sat on the top step of the grand staircase, her yellow birthday dress pooling around her feet, listening to her father talk on the phone in his study below. She knew she shouldn't be eavesdropping, but sometimes that was the only way to know what was really going on. Adults always thought children didn't understand things, but Sophie understood a lot more than people gave her credit for. Yes, sweetheart, I'll see you tonight, her father's voice drifted up the stairs. I can't wait. It's been too long. I know. I'll bring your favorite. Sophie's heart sank like a stone dropping into water. Her father had someone he called sweetheart. Someone he was going to see tonight. Someone who wasn't Brianna. For 3 days since her birthday party, Sophie had been so hopeful. Daddy had smiled more in the past few days than he had in months. He'd been on the phone constantly, making calls about apartments for Brianna, insisting it was the least he could do. Sophie had watched him during those calls, seen the way his face softened when he talked about Brianna, the way he'd started humming while making coffee in the morning. But now there was someone else. Some mystery woman who Daddy called sweetheart and couldn't wait to see. Sophie felt tears burning in her eyes. She'd been so sure her plan was working. Brianna was perfect. She was kind and funny and beautiful, and she'd sat with Sophie during the party, braiding her hair and telling her stories about the children in her classroom. Brianna had even helped clean up afterward without being asked, chatting with Daddy about books and music like they'd been friends forever. And now Daddy had a secret sweetheart. Sophie stood up, her small hands clenched into fists. She needed to figure out who this woman was and why Daddy was seeing her instead of spending time with Brianna. Maybe if Sophie could understand what was happening, she could fix it. She'd gotten Daddy and Brianna to meet. She could make sure they stayed together. Meanwhile, at her new apartment, Brianna Thompson was still in shock at how quickly her life had turned around. True to his word, Andrew had called her Monday morning with not 1 but 3 apartment options, all in safe neighborhoods, all within her budget. He'd explained that he'd spoken with several property management companies he'd worked with over the years, mentioned he had a friend who needed housing, and they'd been happy to help. The apartment she'd chosen was perfect. A 1-bedroom in a renovated building near the river with hardwood floors, updated appliances, and neighbors who smiled and said hello. The rent was exactly what she'd been paying before, with a lease that protected her from sudden increases. Andrew had even arranged for a moving company to transfer her belongings, refusing to let her pay for it. Consider it a late birthday gift for Sophie, he'd said when she tried to protest. You made her day special. This is my way of saying thank you. Brianna had accepted with deep gratitude, feeling the weight of stress lift from her shoulders. For the first time in weeks she could breathe properly. She could sleep without nightmares of being homeless. She could focus on her students instead of constantly worrying about where she'd live. Andrew had even stopped by yesterday to check on her, bringing pizza and helping her unpack boxes. They'd talked for hours, the conversation flowing as easily as it had at the cafe. Brianna found herself laughing more than she had in months, found herself looking forward to his texts throughout the day, checking her phone more often than she probably should. But she kept reminding herself not to read too much into his kindness. Andrew Mitchell was a billionaire who'd lost his wife 2 years ago. He was being helpful because that's the kind of person he was, not because he was interested in her romantically. Besides, they came from completely different worlds. She was a preschool teacher barely making ends meet. He owned a company that developed cutting-edge medical technology. Still, when her phone buzzed with a text from him on Wednesday evening, her heart did a little skip. Andrew, Sophie wants to know if you'd like to come for dinner Friday. No pressure, but she's been talking about you nonstop. Something about teaching her to braid hair like you did at the party? Brianna smiled at her phone, typing back quickly. Brianna, I'd love to. What time? And can I bring anything? Andrew, 6 p.m. And just bring yourself. Though fair warning, Sophie's already planning to monopolize your entire evening. I might not get to talk to you at all. Brianna, I think I can handle that. See you Friday. She set down her phone, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the tea she'd been drinking. This wasn't a date. It was dinner with a friend and his daughter. That was all. But as Friday approached, Brianna found herself taking extra care with her appearance, choosing a coral-colored blouse and white pants that made her feel confident and pretty. She told herself it was because she wanted to make a good impression on Sophie, not because she wanted Andrew to notice her. When Friday evening arrived, Andrew was in his bedroom, trying to decide between 2 dress shirts, and feeling ridiculous for caring. It was just dinner. Brianna was coming over to spend time with Sophie, not to see him. He'd invited her as a friend, as a thank you for being so kind to his daughter. But he couldn't deny that he'd thought about her constantly since the birthday party. The way she'd laughed with Sophie, the genuine joy on her face when she'd seen her new apartment, the quiet strength in her eyes when she talked about her father's death. Brianna Thompson was unlike anyone he'd met in a long time. Real, honest, and unimpressed by wealth or status. His phone rang and he glanced at the caller ID. Mom. Andrew smiled, picking up immediately. Hi, Mom. Hello, darling. Rose Mitchell's warm voice came through the speaker. How's my favorite son? I'm your only son, Andrew pointed out as he did every time she used that greeting. Which makes you my favorite by default, Rose replied cheerfully. How's my beautiful granddaughter? Excited. We have someone coming for dinner, and Sophie's been preparing for 2 days like we're hosting royalty. Oh, someone special? Rose's voice carried a note of interest that made Andrew immediately cautious. A friend. The woman Sophie randomly called from my phone, remember? I told you about that. Ah yes, the preschool teacher. Brianna, wasn't it? Sophie told me all about her when I called on her birthday. She said Brianna was the prettiest and nicest person she'd ever met. Mom, don't start, Andrew warned, but there was affection in his voice. Rose Mitchell had been after him to start dating again for the past year, insisting that Caroline would want him to be happy, to find love again. I'm not starting anything, Rose said innocently. I just think it's wonderful that Sophie's made a new friend. And if that friend happens to make you smile for the first time in 2 years, well, that's just a bonus. You're impossible, Andrew said, but he was smiling. What did you call for, Mom? Do I need a reason to call my son? But actually, I wanted to confirm our dinner next Tuesday. You're still coming, right? It's been too long since I've seen you and Sophie. Of course. We wouldn't miss it. Tuesday at 7? Perfect. And Andrew? Bring Brianna if you'd like. I'd love to meet the woman who has Sophie so excited. It's not like that, Mom. Of course not, sweetheart, Rose said, and Andrew could hear the smile in her voice. I'll see you Tuesday. Tell Sophie I love her. I will. Love you, Mom. Love you too. After they hung up, Andrew realized he was still smiling. His mother had always been his biggest supporter, even during the darkest days after Caroline's death. She'd moved closer to help with Sophie, had been there for every milestone, every hard moment. If anyone deserved to see him happy again, it was Rose Mitchell. He looked at himself in the mirror at the man staring back. For the first time in a long time, he saw more than grief and responsibility. He saw possibility. Downstairs, the doorbell rang and Sophie's excited squeal echoed through the house. She's here. Daddy, Miss Bree is here. Andrew took one last look at himself, chose the navy blue shirt, and headed downstairs to welcome their guest, unaware that his daughter was about to embark on a mission to uncover the identity of the mysterious sweetheart, and that her investigation would nearly derail the fragile connection growing between him and Brianna. Sometimes, he would later reflect, the biggest obstacles to happiness weren't external circumstances but simple misunderstandings. And sometimes, a 6-year-old girl's determination could create complications even as she tried to fix them. Dinner at the Mitchell home became a regular occurrence over the next 3 weeks. What started as one Friday evening turned into twice weekly visits, with Sophie texting Brianna, using Andrew's phone with permission now, to invite her for dinner, movie nights, or weekend outings to the park. Brianna found herself woven into the fabric of their lives in a way that felt both natural and slightly terrifying. She was falling for them. Both of them. Sophie's enthusiasm and sweet nature made her easy to love, but Andrew was more complicated. Every conversation revealed new layers. His passion for medical innovation, his dedication to making healthcare accessible, his quiet grief for the wife he'd lost, and his absolute devotion to his daughter. He was brilliant and kind, and every time he smiled at her, Brianna felt her careful walls crumbling a little more. But she kept her feelings locked away, buried deep where they couldn't complicate the friendship they were building. Andrew was still healing. She was just beginning to stabilize her own life. They came from different worlds. There were 1,000 reasons why romance between them was a bad idea. It was a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after Sophie's party, when Brianna's car finally gave up. She was driving home from Sunshine Learning Center when the engine made a horrible grinding noise and smoke started pouring from under the hood. She managed to pull over safely, but when she tried to restart the car, nothing happened. Brianna sat in her broken-down car on the side of the road, fighting back frustrated tears. The car was 12 years old, had over 200,000 miles on it, and had been making concerning noises for months. She'd known this was coming, but that didn't make it any easier to handle. A new car wasn't in her budget. Even a used car would strain her finances. She'd have to rely on buses and rideshares, which would mean leaving home earlier, getting home later, and spending money she didn't have on transportation. She pulled out her phone to call a tow truck, but before she could, a text from Andrew came through. "Andrew, Sophie wants to know if you can come for dinner tonight. I'm making my famous lasagna." Brianna stared at the message, then at her smoking car, and made a decision. She called Andrew instead of texting back. "Hello." His voice was warm and she could hear Sophie singing in the background. "Andrew, I'm sorry to bother you, but my car just died. I'm on the side of Route 9, near the shopping center. I was going to call a tow truck, but I thought maybe if it's not too much trouble, could you recommend a good mechanic? I don't really know who to trust." "Don't call a tow truck," Andrew said immediately. "Text me your exact location. I'll be there in 15 minutes. You don't have to do that. I can handle." "Brianna." His voice was gentle but firm. "I'm already grabbing my keys. Send me your location." She did, and true to his word, Andrew arrived 14 minutes later in a sleek black SUV, Sophie buckled in the back seat. He pulled up behind Brianna's car, got out, and immediately popped her hood to look at the engine. "Daddy knows about cars," Sophie announced proudly, having scrambled out of the SUV. "He says every person should know how to check their own oil and change a tire." "Your daddy's right," Brianna said, watching as Andrew peered at the engine with a frown. After a few minutes, Andrew straightened, wiping his hands on a rag he'd pulled from his vehicle. "Your engine's seized. The car's not going anywhere under its own power. How much will that cost to fix?" Brianna asked, already mentally calculating whether she could afford it. Andrew's expression was sympathetic. "Brianna, this car isn't worth fixing. The repair would cost more than the vehicle's value. You need a different car." "I can't afford a different car," Brianna said quietly, aware of Sophie listening. "I'll have to make do with public transportation." "That'll add 2 hours to your commute every day," Andrew pointed out. "You'll be exhausted, and it's not safe to be waiting at bus stops late at night in some parts of the city." "I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do." Andrew pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my mechanic to tow your car. Then you're coming with us for dinner, and tomorrow we're going to look at cars." "Andrew?" "Please don't argue," he said, meeting her eyes. "I'm not trying to overstep. I'm just trying to help a friend who's been incredibly kind to my daughter. Let me do this." Brianna wanted to refuse. She wanted to insist on handling it herself, on not being a burden. But standing there on the side of the road, watching Sophie hold Andrew's hand and look between them with hopeful eyes, she realized that sometimes accepting help was the brave choice, not the weak one. "Okay," she said softly. "Thank you." The next day, Andrew picked her up at 9 in the morning. He'd arranged for them to visit a dealership owned by a friend, someone he trusted to give them honest advice. Brianna had saved $3,000 for emergencies, and she was prepared to use it for a down payment on a reliable used car. But when they arrived at the dealership, Andrew's friend, a cheerful man named Tom Rodriguez, showed them to a section of nearly new vehicles, all priced well below market value. "These are trade-ins from company executives," Tom explained. "Low mileage, excellent condition, full service history. Andrew told me you need something reliable, safe, and fuel efficient." Brianna looked at the cars, then at the price tags, and felt her chest tighten. Even these affordable options were beyond what she could manage with monthly payments on her teacher's salary. "Tom, could we look at something less expensive?" she asked. "Maybe something a few years older?" "These are the best value," Tom insisted. "Here, why don't you test drive this blue Honda? It's only 3 years old, has 30,000 miles, and it's incredibly reliable." Brianna looked at Andrew, who nodded encouragingly. "Just try it. See how it feels." The car was perfect. It drove smoothly, had all the safety features she could want, and even had Bluetooth for her phone. When they returned from the test drive, Brianna was in love with the car but resigned to looking at cheaper options. "I'll need to think about it," she told Tom. "It's a beautiful car, but I need to crunch the numbers." "Actually," Andrew said, "I'd like to buy this car." Brianna's eyes widened. "What? No. Absolutely not." "For my company," Andrew continued as if she hadn't spoken. "We have a program for employees who need reliable transportation. We buy the vehicle, and they make affordable monthly payments directly to the company interest-free. It's a benefit we offer." "I don't work for your company," Brianna pointed out. "But I'm thinking of starting a charitable foundation focused on education. I'd need someone to help develop programs, work with schools, advise on best practices. It would be part-time, just a few hours a week, but it would come with benefits, including access to our transportation program." Andrew's expression was sincere, his eyes meeting hers steadily. Brianna stared at him, torn between gratitude and disbelief. "Did you just invent a job for me so you could justify buying me a car?" "I've been thinking about starting the foundation for months," Andrew said, which wasn't entirely a lie. He had been thinking about it, just not seriously until this moment. "And you'd be perfect for it. You know education, you understand what teachers and students need. This would be legitimate work, Brianna, not charity." "The foundation is a great idea," Tom chimed in. "And this payment program Andrew's talking about would put your monthly cost at around $200. That's less than you'd pay for a much older car with higher maintenance costs." Brianna looked between the two men, then at the car, then back at Andrew. She knew he was stretching the truth, creating justifications to help her. But she also saw the genuine offer in his eyes, the respect for her pride, the care he'd taken to make this feel like less of a handout and more of an opportunity. $200 a month? She asked quietly. "With no interest, and you'd be doing real work for the foundation. Writing curricula, visiting schools, helping me understand what educators need most. It's a job, Brianna. You'd be earning this." Andrew stepped closer, his voice softening. "Please let me help you. You've given Sophie so much joy. Let me give you peace of mind about getting to work safely." Brianna felt tears prickling her eyes. "You barely know me. Why are you doing all this?" "Because you're a good person who deserves good things," Andrew said simply. "Because life is hard enough without worrying about transportation. And because I can help, so I should help. That's what Caroline taught me. That's what I want Sophie to learn. We help each other. That's how the world should work." Brianna looked at the car, at Andrew's earnest face, at Tom waiting patiently for an answer. She thought about hours saved not waiting for buses, about safety driving home late after evening volunteering, about the dignity of having reliable transportation. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll accept. With gratitude and with the understanding that I'll be working hard for that foundation." "I wouldn't expect anything less," Andrew said, his smile reaching his eyes. 2 hours later, Brianna drove away in her new-to-her blue Honda, her heart full of emotions she couldn't quite name. In the passenger seat was a folder Andrew had prepared with information about the foundation, proof that this was a real opportunity, not just elaborate charity. What she didn't know was that Andrew had indeed been considering an education foundation, had in fact discussed it with his board months ago. Meeting Brianna had simply crystallized the idea, given it focus and purpose. She wasn't a charity case to him. She was an inspiration, a reminder of why he built his company in the first place. To help people, to make lives better, to use his resources for good. And if helping her also gave him more opportunities to spend time with her, to get to know her better, to watch her smile bloom across her beautiful face, well, that was just a bonus. At home that evening, Sophie cornered her father in his study. "Daddy, you really like Miss Bree, don't you?" Andrew looked up from his laptop, meeting his daughter's knowing eyes. "She's become a good friend, yes." "No, Daddy. You like her. Like how you liked Mommy." Sophie climbed into his lap, her small hands framing his face. "It's okay. Mommy would want you to be happy. She told me so." Andrew felt his throat tighten. "She did. Before she went to heaven. She said that love doesn't end, it just changes. And that loving someone new doesn't mean you stopped loving someone else." Sophie's eyes, so much like Caroline's, shone with wisdom beyond her years. "Miss Bree makes you smile, Daddy. Real smiles. I like her too." "I know you do, sweetheart." Andrew hugged his daughter close. "But Miss Bree and I are just friends right now." "But maybe you could be more?" Sophie asked hopefully. "Like boyfriend and girlfriend? And then maybe even husband and wife someday?" "Maybe," Andrew admitted, because he couldn't lie to his daughter. "But these things take time. We have to make sure Miss Bree wants the same things we do. We can't rush her. I won't rush, Sophie promised. Then after a pause, but Daddy? Who's the sweetheart person you keep talking to on the phone? The one you're going to see tonight. Andrew blinked, confused. What sweetheart person? You keep saying yes, sweetheart, I'll see you tonight. I heard you last week and the week before. Do you have another girlfriend? Andrew's confusion cleared and he laughed. Oh, Sophie. That's Grandma Rose. I call her sweetheart sometimes because she's my mother and I love her. I have dinner with her every Tuesday, remember? That's who I'm seeing tonight. Sophie's eyes went wide. Grandma? The sweetheart is Grandma? Of course. Who did you think it was? I thought. Sophie trailed off, relief flooding her face. I thought you had a secret girlfriend and I was worried Miss Bree would be sad. Andrew hugged his daughter tighter, understanding her confusion and touched by her concern. No secret girlfriend. Just my mom, your grandma, who I love very much. But not the way I... He paused, then decided honesty was best. Not the way I might be starting to feel about Miss Bree. Sophie beamed. Really? You really like her? Really, Andrew confirmed. But this is between us for now, okay? I don't want to make things awkward if Miss Bree doesn't feel the same way. She does, Sophie said confidently. I can tell. She looks at you the way Mommy used to look at you. Like you're special. As Sophie skipped off to get ready for dinner with Grandma Rose, Andrew sat in his study, his heart feeling lighter than it had in 2 years. Maybe, just maybe, he was ready to love again. Maybe Caroline's death hadn't closed his heart forever. Maybe there was room for new love while still honoring old love. And maybe, just maybe, a 6-year-old girl's random phone call had been the beginning of something beautiful for all of them. Over the following weeks, Brianna's life transformed in ways she'd never imagined. The education foundation Andrew had mentioned became real, with Brianna working 10 hours a week developing programs to provide resources for underfunded schools. She visited classrooms, talked to teachers, and created grants that would help students who needed supplies, books, and support. It wasn't charity work pretending to be a job. It was genuine, meaningful work that used her expertise and passion. And it paid her enough that, combined with her teaching salary, she could finally start building a real savings account again. But more than the financial stability, it was the time with Andrew and Sophie that filled her heart. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm. Dinners twice a week, weekend outings to museums or parks, movie nights where Sophie fell asleep between them on the couch. It felt like family, like the life Brianna had always wanted but never thought she'd have. It was a Wednesday afternoon, 6 weeks after Sophie's birthday party, when everything almost fell apart. Brianna was leaving school after a long day when her phone buzzed with a call from Sunshine Learning Center's director, Patricia Wu. Brianna, do you have a moment to come to my office? Patricia's voice was strained. Of course. Brianna changed direction, her stomach knotting with worry. Patricia never called teachers to her office unless something was wrong. In Patricia's small office, Brianna sat across from the director, noting the budget reports spread across the desk. Patricia looked tired, her usually cheerful face drawn with stress. I'm going to be direct because you deserve that, Patricia said. The center is facing severe budget cuts. The city reduced education funding and we're going to have to let go of 3 teachers. I've been fighting this for weeks, but there's no way around it. Brianna felt the floor drop out from under her. Am I one of the 3? You're the most junior teacher on staff, Patricia said gently. By seniority rules, yes, you'd be one of those let go. Your last day would be the end of next month. I'm so sorry, Brianna. You're an excellent teacher, and this has nothing to do with your performance. Brianna nodded numbly, her mind racing. She'd just gotten stable. She just started feeling secure. And now this. However, Patricia continued, there might be another option. If we could find additional funding, even just $50,000, we could keep everyone. I've been reaching out to donors, applying for grants, but everything takes time we don't have. Brianna walked to her car in a daze, her hands shaking as she unlocked the door. Her new to her Honda, the one Andrew had helped her get, suddenly felt like a mockery. What good was reliable transportation if she had nowhere to drive to every day? She sat in the parking lot trying not to cry. She should tell Andrew. The foundation could possibly help if she asked. $50,000 was nothing to someone like him. But the thought of asking for more help, of seeming like she was taking advantage of his generosity, made her stomach churn with shame. No. She'd find another teaching job. She'd figure this out on her own. She had to. That evening she went to the Mitchell home for dinner as planned, trying to act normal. But Sophie noticed immediately that something was wrong. Miss Bree, why are you sad? Sophie asked, climbing into Brianna's lap during dinner. Did something bad happen? I'm just tired, sweetie, Brianna said, forcing a smile. Long day at school. But Andrew's eyes were on her, concerned and knowing. After dinner, while Sophie was upstairs brushing her teeth, he pulled Brianna aside. Something's wrong, he said. It wasn't a question. It's nothing. Just work stress. Brianna couldn't meet his eyes. Brianna. Andrew's hand gently lifted her chin so she had to look at him. Talk to me. Please. And just like that, her careful composure crumbled. The tears she'd been holding back all afternoon finally fell. They're cutting teachers at the center. I'm losing my job at the end of next month. Andrew's arms came around her immediately, pulling her into a hug that felt like safety and comfort and everything she'd been trying not to lean on. She let herself cry against his shoulder, feeling his hand stroke her back, hearing his quiet murmurs of comfort. It's going to be okay, he said softly. We'll figure this out. I don't want to be a burden, Brianna said into his shirt. You've already done so much for me. I can't keep asking for help. You're not asking. I'm offering. Andrew pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hands still resting on her shoulders. How much does the center need? 50,000 to keep all the teachers. But Andrew, I can't. Yes, you can. The foundation's first major donation will be to Sunshine Learning Center. We'll fund not just the teachers' salaries but also new supplies, updated equipment, whatever's needed. His voice was firm, decided. This is exactly why I started the foundation, Brianna. To help educators like you do their jobs. Let me help. I don't want you to think I'm using you, Brianna whispered. That I'm only spending time with you and Sophie because of your money. Andrew's expression softened, and his thumb brushed away a tear from her cheek. I don't think that. I've never thought that. You're one of the most genuine people I've ever met. You care about people, about making a difference. That's why I want to help. Not because you've asked but because I can, and because you deserve to keep doing the work you love. This is too much, Brianna protested weakly, even as hope bloomed in her chest. It's not enough, Andrew countered. You've given Sophie something I couldn't. Joy, laughter, a sense of family again. You've reminded me that life isn't just about surviving grief, it's about finding reasons to be happy. Let me give you this peace of mind. Please. Brianna looked into his eyes and saw more than just kindness. She saw something deeper, something that made her heart race and her breath catch. But she was afraid to name it, afraid to hope. Okay, she said finally. I accept. With gratitude and with the promise that I'll pay it forward however I can. That's all I ask. Andrew smiled, and they stood there for a moment longer, his hands still on her shoulders, their faces closer than they'd been before. Daddy? Miss Bree? Sophie's voice called from upstairs. Can we watch a movie now? The moment broke and they stepped apart, but something had shifted between them. Something had deepened. That night, as they watched an animated movie with Sophie between them, Brianna felt Andrew's hand brush against hers on the couch. It could have been an accident, but when his fingers lingered, then gently laced through hers, she knew it wasn't. She looked at him and he looked back, and in his eyes she saw everything she'd been feeling but been too afraid to acknowledge. He cared about her. Not just as Sophie's friend, not just as someone to help, but as a woman, as someone he wanted in his life. Sophie, oblivious to the silent conversation happening over her head, snuggled deeper into the couch, her eyes growing heavy. By the time the movie ended, she was fast asleep. Andrew carried Sophie upstairs to bed while Brianna waited in the living room, her heart pounding. When he came back down, they stood facing each other, the air between them charged with unspoken words. I should probably go, Brianna said softly, even though she didn't want to. Or you could stay for coffee, Andrew suggested. Talk for a bit? I'd like that. They moved to the kitchen, where Andrew made coffee while Brianna sat at the island, watching him move around the space with easy familiarity. The kitchen was stunning. White marble counters, stainless steel appliances, a window over the sink that looked out onto the moonlit garden. But it was Andrew who held her attention, the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders, the concentration on his face as he measured coffee grounds, the small smile that played at his lips. What are you thinking about? He asked, handing her a mug. How surreal this all is, Brianna admitted. 2 months ago I was about to be evicted, barely making ends meet, feeling like my life was going nowhere. And now I'm sitting in this beautiful kitchen, drinking coffee with a billionaire who's saved my job, given me a car and made me feel like I matter. It doesn't feel real. It's real, Andrew said, sitting beside her. And you've always mattered, Brianna. Your circumstances didn't define your worth. You're valuable because of who you are, not what you have. You sound like something Caroline would have said. Brianna hadn't meant to bring up his late wife, but the words slipped out. Andrew didn't flinch. Instead he smiled sadly. She would have liked you. She always loved people who dedicated their lives to helping others. She would have said you have a good heart. I wish I could have known her. In some ways I think you do. Sophie talks about you the same way she talks about her mother. With love, with trust, with this certainty that you'll always be there for her. Andrew's voice grew rough. She started calling you Miss Bree the way she used to call Caroline Mama C. It's her way of saying your family. Brianna felt tears threatening again. I love her. I hope you know that. I didn't expect to, but I do. She's an amazing child. She is. And she loves you too. Andrew paused, then added quietly, she's not the only one. Brianna's breath caught. Andrew? I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I just want you to know. These past 2 months you've changed everything for us. Sophie's happy again, truly happy. And He trailed off, searching for words. I'm remembering what it feels like to look forward to something. To want more than just getting through each day. That's because of you. I feel the same way, Brianna admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I keep telling myself we're just friends, that I shouldn't hope for more. But then you look at me, or you hold my hand, or you do something impossibly kind, and I can't help feeling like maybe this could be something more? Andrew finished. His hand reached across the counter, covering hers. Because I'd like it to be. If you're ready. If you want that too. Brianna turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. I'm scared. We come from such different worlds. And what if Sophie gets hurt? What if this doesn't work out? All fair concerns, Andrew acknowledged. But Brianna, different worlds don't matter when two people care about each other. And as for Sophie, she's already attached to you. The question isn't whether she'll be hurt if things don't work out. It's whether we're brave enough to try for something that could be beautiful for all of us. Brianna looked at their joined hands, then up at Andrew's face. In his eyes she saw hope, vulnerability, and something that looked a lot like love. It terrified her and thrilled her in equal measure. Okay, she said softly. Let's try. Let's see where this goes. Andrew's smile was brilliant, transforming his face from merely handsome to absolutely radiant. Yeah. Brianna smiled back, feeling like she was standing on the edge of something wonderful and terrifying. But we take it slow. For Sophie's sake. As slow as you need, Andrew promised. Then, with a gentleness that made her heart ache, he lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. Thank you for giving us a chance. They talked for another hour, sitting close at the kitchen island, hands linked, voices soft in the quiet house. They talked about their fears, their hopes, their dreams for the future. Andrew told her about Caroline, about the grief that still came in waves but no longer threatened to drown him. Brianna told him about her father, about the guilt she still carried for not being there when he died, about her mother's struggles and her own fears of not being enough. When Brianna finally left that night, driving home in her Honda under the stars, she felt like she was glowing from the inside out. It wasn't just about Andrew, though her heart raced every time she thought about his kiss on her hand. It was about possibility, about second chances, about the way life could surprise you when you least expected it. She thought about Sophie's random phone call 2 months ago, about how close she'd come to ignoring it. If she had, where would she be now? Probably homeless, jobless, hopeless. Instead, she had a home, a job she loved, and the beginning of something that could become love. Sometimes, she thought as she pulled into her apartment complex, the universe conspires to give us exactly what we need, exactly when we need it. We just have to be brave enough to say yes. Sophie Mitchell had a secret mission, and she was taking it very seriously. Ever since that evening 2 weeks ago when she'd seen her daddy and Miss Bree holding hands on the couch after they thought she was asleep, Sophie had been working on phase 2 of her plan, making sure nothing interfered with their growing romance. She'd already confirmed that the mysterious sweetheart was just Grandma Rose, which was a relief. But Sophie was smart enough to know that falling in love wasn't automatic, even when two people clearly liked each other. She'd seen movies where people made mistakes, where misunderstandings ruined everything, where one person was too scared to admit their feelings. She wasn't going to let that happen to her daddy and Miss Bree. So Sophie had become a detective, carefully observing every interaction, noting every smile and blush, cataloging every moment of hand-holding or longing glances. She kept a notebook, pink with unicorns on the cover, hidden under her bed where she wrote down her observations. October 15th. Daddy smiled at Miss Bree 7 times during dinner. Miss Bree blushed 4 times. They held hands when they thought I wasn't looking. October 18th. Daddy hummed while making breakfast. He only hums when he's happy. Miss Bree sent him 3 text messages today and he smiled every time. October 22nd. Miss Bree brought Daddy his favorite coffee without him asking. She remembered he likes it with 2 sugars and cream. That's love. On a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after the hand-holding incident, Sophie sat in her room reviewing her notes. Her daddy and Miss Bree were definitely falling in love, but neither of them had said it out loud yet. And Sophie knew from experience, movies mostly, that sometimes grown-ups needed a little push. She had a plan. Downstairs, Andrew was on the phone with his mother, Rose, discussing Thanksgiving plans. It was still 5 weeks away, but Rose liked to plan everything well in advance. "So you'll come here for Thanksgiving?" Rose was saying. "I'll make the turkey, you bring the stuffing and the wine. Actually, Mom, I was thinking maybe we could have Thanksgiving at my house this year. Invite you over." Andrew hesitated, then added, "And I'd like to invite Brianna and her mother too." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Rose said, her voice warm with approval, "Things are getting serious between you two?" "Maybe. Probably. Yes." Andrew ran his hand through his hair, feeling like a teenager talking to his mother about his crush. "I really like her, Mom. Sophie adores her. And I think Caroline would be happy about this. Darling, Caroline would be thrilled. She never wanted you to spend your life alone. She told me so, made me promise I'd encourage you to love again when you were ready." Rose's voice grew thick with emotion. "I'm so happy for you. And I'd love to meet Brianna properly, spend real time with her. Thanksgiving at your house sounds perfect." "Thanks, Mom. That means a lot." "Have you told Brianna how you feel? Not just that you like her, but how much?" "Not yet. We're taking things slow. She's worried about Sophie getting hurt if things don't work out. I'm trying to respect her pace. Sophie's smart enough to know you care about Brianna. And speaking of Sophie, how's she handling all this?" Andrew smiled. "She's thrilled. In fact, I think she's trying to play matchmaker again. I keep finding her notebook with observations about me and Brianna. It's adorable and slightly concerning." Rose laughed. "That child is determined. I wonder where she gets that from." "Definitely from Caroline," Andrew said immediately. "Of course, dear. Definitely not from you at all." They talked for a few more minutes before hanging up, and Andrew sat in his study thinking about Thanksgiving, about introducing Brianna to his mother officially, about the future he was starting to imagine with her in it. His phone buzzed with a text from Brianna. "Brianna, Sophie texted me asking if I could come over today for a surprise. Should I be worried?" Andrew smiled, typing back. "Andrew, probably, but it'll be a good surprise. She's been plotting something all week. Brianna, I'll bring cookies. That seems like appropriate preparation for whatever's coming. Andrew, you're a smart woman. See you soon? Brianna, I'll be there in an hour." When Brianna arrived, Sophie was waiting at the door, practically bouncing with excitement. She wore a bright maroon dress, and her hair was in 2 neat braids that Andrew had learned to do through many YouTube tutorials. "Miss Bree. Come in, come in. I have something to show you." Sophie grabbed Brianna's hand and started pulling her toward the stairs. "Should I be scared?" Brianna asked Andrew, who was standing in the hallway trying to look innocent. "Terrified," Andrew said with a grin. "But trust me, it's worth it." Sophie led Brianna upstairs to her room, which had been transformed. Fairy lights hung from the ceiling, creating a magical glow. A blanket fort took up one corner, and in the center of the room was a small table set for tea with plastic cups and plates. "I made us a tea party," Sophie announced proudly. "And I invited Daddy too because I want to talk to both of you about something important." Andrew appeared in the doorway, ducking slightly to avoid hitting his head on the fairy lights. He settled on the floor with considerably less grace than Brianna, his long legs folded awkwardly as he tried to fit at the small table. Sophie served them pretend tea and real cookies, the ones Brianna had brought, then sat back in her little chair with a serious expression on her face. "I have something to say," she announced. "I called Miss Bree 2 months ago because Daddy was lonely and sad. And now Miss Bree is here all the time and Daddy smiles all the time and everyone is happy. But I think it's time for the next step." "The next step?" Andrew asked cautiously. "You need to be boyfriend and girlfriend," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "Like, officially. Because right now you're just friends who hold hands sometimes and look at each other all silly. But you should be together for real." Brianna choked on her cookie and Andrew's face turned red. They exchanged glances, both clearly trying not to laugh. "Sophie, honey," Brianna said gently. These things take time. Your daddy and I are still getting to know each other. But you've known each other for 2 whole months, Sophie protested. That's 60 days. In the movies, people fall in love in like a week. Movies aren't real life, sweetheart, Andrew said. In real life, people need time to make sure they're right for each other. But you are right for each other, Sophie insisted. Her eyes filled with tears, surprising them both. I love Miss Bree. I want her to be part of our family for real. What if she goes away? What if she finds someone else to be with and leaves us? Brianna immediately moved to kneel beside Sophie, pulling the little girl into a hug. Oh, Sophie. I'm not going anywhere. Even if your daddy and I are just friends, I'll still be in your life. You're stuck with me, kiddo? Promise. Sophie's voice was muffled against Brianna's shoulder. Promise. Brianna pulled back to look at Sophie's face. Your friendship is precious to me. Nothing will change that. Andrew watched them, his heart swelling with emotion. This was what he wanted, what he'd been afraid to hope for. A family, complete and whole again. Not replacing Caroline, never that, but building something new and beautiful from the foundation of love and loss. Sophie, he said softly, Miss Bree and I do care about each other very much. We're just trying to be careful because we care about you most of all. We don't want to rush into anything that might hurt you if it doesn't work out. But what if it does work out? Sophie asked. What if you're so busy being careful that you miss out on being happy? From the mouths of 6-year-olds, Andrew thought. His daughter had somehow cut through all his fears and hesitations with perfect clarity. He looked at Brianna, still kneeling beside Sophie, beautiful in her simple green sweater and jeans. Her eyes met his, and in them he saw the same question Sophie had just asked. What if they were so busy being careful that they missed out on something wonderful? You're right, Andrew said, surprising both Sophie and Brianna. We shouldn't let fear hold us back. He stood, then held out his hand to Brianna. Brianna Thompson, would you officially be my girlfriend? Would you give us a chance to see where this could go? Brianna stared at him, then at Sophie's hopeful face, then back at Andrew. You're asking me to be your girlfriend in front of your 6-year-old daughter at a pretend tea party? I'm asking you to take a chance on us, Andrew corrected gently. All 3 of us as a family. If you're ready. If you want this too. Brianna felt tears welling in her eyes. This wasn't how she'd imagined this moment, but somehow it was perfect. Because Sophie was at the heart of all of this, the reason they'd met, the bridge between them. Of course she should be here for this. Yes, Brianna said, taking Andrew's hand and letting him pull her to her feet. I'd love to be your girlfriend. Sophie squealed with delight, jumping up and wrapping her arms around both of them. I knew it. I knew you loved each other. Well, we like each other very much, Brianna corrected gently, though her heart was singing a different tune. Love takes time. But you'll get there, Sophie said confidently. I can tell. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of happiness. They had their tea party, built a more elaborate blanket fort, and watched a movie curled up together on the couch. And when Sophie fell asleep between them again, Andrew and Brianna sat close, their hands linked over the child's sleeping form. Thank you, Andrew whispered, for giving us this chance. Thank you for being patient with me, Brianna whispered back. And for raising such an amazing daughter who refuses to let anyone wallow in fear. She gets that from her mother. Andrew's voice was thick with emotion. Caroline never let fear stop her from loving people, from taking chances. Sophie's the same way. I wish I'd known Caroline, Brianna said quietly. But I'm grateful for the gift she left behind. Sophie is extraordinary. So are you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Sophie sleep, both thinking about the future that stretched ahead of them. It wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges, adjustments, moments of doubt. But they would face them together as a family. Later, as Brianna was leaving, Andrew walked her to her car. The autumn evening was cool and leaves rustled in the breeze. At her car door, Andrew pulled her close, his hands gentle on her waist. I know we said we'd take things slow, he said, his voice low. But is it okay if I do something not slow? What did you have in mind? Brianna's heart raced. This. And Andrew kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was a first kiss, tentative and gentle, but it held within it the potential for something extraordinary. When they pulled apart, Brianna was smiling so wide her cheeks hurt. That was definitely not slow. Too fast. Andrew looked worried. Perfect, Brianna assured him. Absolutely perfect. She drove home that evening with her heart full, thinking about 6-year-old matchmakers and billionaires who helped preschool teachers and first kisses that tasted like hope. Sometimes, she thought, the best things in life came from saying yes to random phone calls from determined children. And sometimes, love surprised you when you least expected it, wrapped in the form of a grieving father and his extraordinary daughter who refused to let life's hardships steal their capacity for joy. Are you rooting for Andrew and Brianna? Do you believe in second chances at love? Subscribe to follow their journey and drop a comment about what you think happens next. Will Sophie's matchmaking lead to happily ever after? Grandma Rose Mitchell arrived at Andrew's house on Tuesday evening with her famous apple pie and a mischievous glint in her eye. At 72 years old, Rose was still sharp, energetic, and remarkably good at reading people. She'd been dying to meet Brianna properly ever since Andrew had told her they were officially together. "Where's my granddaughter?" Rose asked as Andrew helped her with her coat. "Upstairs doing homework. She'll be down in a minute." Andrew kissed his mother's cheek. "How are you feeling? Your back still bothering you?" "I'm fine, stop fussing. You're worse than your father was." Rose swatted his arm affectionately, then studied his face. "You look happy. Really happy." "It's good to see." "I am happy," Andrew admitted. "Nervous about tonight but happy." "Why nervous?" "I'm going to love her." "Sophie already does, and that child is an excellent judge of character." As if summoned, Sophie came thundering down the stairs, launching herself at her grandmother. "Grandma Rose? There's my angel." Rose caught her in a hug, then held her at arm's length. "My goodness, you've grown 6 inches since I last saw you." "It's only been a week, Grandma." "Then you're growing remarkably fast. Must be all that happiness in the house." Rose winked at Andrew over Sophie's head. The doorbell rang and Sophie ran to answer it, returning moments later with Brianna. Andrew felt his breath catch as it did every time he saw her. She wore a red dress that highlighted her warm brown skin, her natural curls framing her face. She looked beautiful and nervous, clutching a bouquet of flowers. "Mrs. Mitchell," Brianna said, stepping forward with a smile that didn't quite hide her anxiety. "It's so lovely to meet you properly. Andrew's told me so much about you. These are for you." Rose accepted the flowers with a delighted smile, then surprised Brianna by pulling her into a hug. "Call me Rose, dear. And thank you, these are beautiful. Now come in, let's not stand in the doorway. I want to hear all about how my son and granddaughter have been driving you crazy." "They don't drive me crazy," Brianna said, relaxing slightly as Rose linked arms with her and led her toward the living room. "They're wonderful." "Give it time," Rose said with a laugh. "Andrew has a tendency to overthink everything, and Sophie never stops asking questions. Between the two of them, they could exhaust a saint." Dinner was relaxed and full of laughter. Rose told stories about Andrew as a child, much to his embarrassment and Sophie's delight. She asked Brianna about her teaching, her family, her hopes for the foundation. It felt less like an interview and more like a conversation between friends. After dinner, while Andrew and Sophie cleaned up the kitchen, Rose and Brianna sat in the living room with tea. "I need to tell you something," Rose said, her expression growing serious. "Andrew was devastated when Caroline died. I've never seen anyone so lost. He threw himself into work, into taking care of Sophie, into anything that would distract him from the grief. For 2 years, I watched him go through the motions of living without actually being alive." Brianna listened quietly, her heart aching for the pain Rose was describing. "But then Sophie called you," Rose continued, "and something changed?" He started smiling again. "He started talking about the future instead of just surviving the present. You gave him back something I thought he'd lost forever: hope." "I think he did the same for me," Brianna said softly. "I was drowning when Sophie called. I'd lost my apartment, I was about to lose my job. I felt like a failure. But they both showed me that accepting help isn't weakness, that kindness still exists, that life can surprise you in beautiful ways." Rose reached over and patted Brianna's hand. "You're good for each other. You're good for Sophie. That child needs people who show her that love is possible even after loss. Thank you for being brave enough to take a chance on my complicated, wonderful family." "Thank you for raising such an incredible son," Brianna replied, tears in her eyes. When Andrew and Sophie finished in the kitchen, they found Rose and Brianna laughing together over photo albums, Rose pointing out embarrassing pictures of Andrew as a teenager. "Mom, you promised never to show those to anyone," Andrew groaned, seeing his high school prom photo. "I made no such promise," Rose said innocently. "Besides, Brianna needs to see what she's getting herself into." Later, as they sat around the living room talking, Sophie suddenly asked, "Grandma Rose, are you the sweetheart?" Rose blinked in confusion. "The sweetheart? Daddy calls someone sweetheart on the phone," Sophie explained. I used to think he had a secret girlfriend, but then he told me it was you. But I want to make sure because Miss Bree is his girlfriend now, and we don't want anyone else to be the sweetheart." Understanding dawned on Rose's face and she laughed. "Oh, Sophie. Yes, I'm the sweetheart. Your daddy has called me that since he was a little boy. It's just a term of affection for his mother. There's no secret girlfriend." "See," Andrew said to Sophie. "I told you that's what I meant." Sophie nodded, satisfied. "Good. Because Miss Bree is the only girlfriend we need." "The only girlfriend I want," Andrew corrected gently, meeting Brianna's eyes. The look that passed between them made Rose smile. This was what Caroline had wanted, what she'd made Rose promise to encourage. Her son was finding happiness again, building a new family while honoring the old one. It was beautiful and right, and Rose felt her heart fill with gratitude. The evening wound down with Rose heading home, extracting promises from Sophie to visit soon and pulling Brianna aside at the door. "Your family now," Rose said quietly. "Not because you're dating my son, but because you've brought joy back to people I love. That makes you one of us." Brianna hugged her, feeling accepted and welcomed in a way she hadn't expected. "Thank you. That means everything to me." After Rose left, Sophie went upstairs to get ready for bed, leaving Andrew and Brianna alone in the quiet house. They settled on the couch, Brianna tucked against Andrew's side, his arm around her shoulders. "Your mother is amazing," Brianna said. "She likes you. I could tell." Andrew pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Sophie was worried about that mystery sweetheart for weeks. "I had no idea she'd been stressing about it." "She wants you to be happy. She wants us to work out." Brianna tilted her head to look up at him. "That's a lot of pressure." "Only if we let it be." Andrew's hand found hers, their fingers lacing together in a gesture that had become natural. "I don't want to rush anything, but I also don't want to waste time being afraid. Life's too short, and I've learned the hard way that we're not guaranteed tomorrow." "I know." Brianna thought about her father, about how sudden his death had been. "But I'm still scared sometimes. What if I'm not enough? What if Sophie decides she doesn't want me around? What if—" Andrew silenced her with a kiss, soft and sweet. When he pulled back, his eyes were serious. "Brianna, you're more than enough. You always have been. I'm not expecting you to be Caroline. I'm not trying to replace her. I'm trying to build something new with you, something that honors what I had while embracing what we could have together." "How do you always know the right thing to say?" Brianna asked, her eyes misting. "I don't. I'm figuring this out as I go, just like you are. But I know what I feel, and I'm tired of being afraid to say it." Andrew took a deep breath. "I'm falling in love with you, Brianna. I don't expect you to say it back, and I'm not trying to rush you. I just need you to know that this isn't casual for me. You're not just Sophie's friend or a pleasant distraction. You're becoming essential to my happiness." Brianna felt tears slip down her cheeks. She'd known, on some level, that her feelings were growing beyond simple affection. But hearing Andrew say the words made it real, made it something she couldn't ignore or rationalize away. "I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered. "It terrifies me, but I can't help it. You've both become so important to me. When I wake up in the morning, I think about you. When something good or bad happens, you're the ones I want to tell. I'm not sure when it happened, but somewhere along the way you became my family." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, processing the weight of what they'd just admitted. It felt monumental and natural all at once. "So what now?" Brianna finally asked. "Now we keep doing what we're doing. We spend time together. We let Sophie be part of this. We build something real, step by step, day by day." Andrew smiled. "And maybe, somewhere down the line, we talk about something more permanent. But only when we're both ready." "I like the sound of that," Brianna said, settling more firmly against his side. "Me too." Upstairs, Sophie was supposed to be asleep, but she'd crept to the top of the stairs to listen. When she heard her father say he was falling in love with Miss Bree, and Miss Bree say it back, Sophie had to clap both hands over her mouth to keep from squealing with joy. Her plan had worked. Her daddy was happy. Miss Bree was happy. They were becoming a real family. Sophie tiptoed back to her room, climbed into bed, and pulled out her unicorn notebook. In neat letters she wrote, "November 2nd, success. Daddy and Miss Bree love each other. Operation Make Daddy Happy is complete. Now I need to start Operation Make Sure They Get Married. But that's for later. For now, everyone is happy, and that's what matters most." She closed the notebook, tucked it under her pillow, and fell asleep with a smile on her face, dreaming of weddings and flower girls and the family they were becoming. Thanksgiving arrived with crisp autumn air and the promise of new traditions. Brianna woke early in her apartment, butterflies dancing in her stomach. Today was important. The first major holiday with Andrew and Sophie, the first time meeting her own mother since officially becoming Andrew's girlfriend, the first time their two families would merge. Her mother, Patricia Thompson, had arrived from her hometown the night before, staying in Brianna's guest room. At 62, Patricia was showing her age. Her diabetes had taken its toll, and she moved more slowly than she used to. But her spirit was strong, and she'd been cautiously optimistic when Brianna had told her about Andrew. A billionaire? Patricia had said over the phone. Baby, are you sure about this? Those kinds of people live in a different world. He's a good man, Mom. He's kind and generous, and Sophie is wonderful. You'll see. Now, as Brianna helped her mother into the car for the drive to Andrew's house, Patricia was quiet, studying her daughter's face. You really love him, don't you? Patricia said. I do. Brianna couldn't hide her smile. I didn't expect it, and it happened faster than I thought possible, but yes. I love him. Both of them. Then I'm happy for you. Patricia patted Brianna's hand. Your father would be proud of how you've built your life. And he'd love seeing you this happy. At the Mitchell home, Andrew was in controlled chaos mode. He'd insisted on hosting Thanksgiving, which meant coordinating with the caterers he'd hired, making sure the house looked perfect, and trying to keep Sophie from eating all the appetizers before anyone arrived. Daddy, when will Miss Bree get here? Sophie asked for the 10th time, wearing her favorite emerald dress. Soon, sweetheart. They should be here any minute. Rose arrived next, carrying pies and wearing a smile. Where's the lucky lady? She asked Andrew. On her way. And Mom, please don't embarrass me today. I would never, Rose said, looking far too innocent. When Brianna and Patricia arrived, Andrew greeted them at the door, his eyes lighting up when he saw Brianna. She looked stunning in a blue dress, her hair styled in soft curls. But it was the older woman beside her who caught his attention. Patricia Thompson had Brianna's eyes and warm smile, though her face was lined with fatigue and the weight of illness. Mrs. Thompson, welcome. Andrew extended his hand. I'm Andrew. It's wonderful to meet you. Call me Patricia, please. And thank you for having us. Patricia's handshake was firm despite her obvious tiredness. Her eyes studied Andrew carefully, the look of a mother assessing the man her daughter loved. Sophie bounded over, immediately charming Patricia with her enthusiasm. Hi. I'm Sophie. Miss Bree talks about you all the time. She said you're the best mom in the world. Patricia's face softened. Well, I don't know about that, but I tried my best. And you must be the young lady who called my daughter out of the blue. That was me, Sophie said proudly. It was my best idea ever because now we're all family. Rose appeared and introductions continued. The women found an easy rapport, Patricia and Rose bonding over shared experiences of raising children and the challenges of aging. Brianna watched, relief flooding through her. Her mother was being welcomed, included, treated with respect and warmth. Thanksgiving dinner was beautiful. The dining room table was set with fine china, autumn-colored flowers as centerpieces, and enough food to feed a small army. Andrew had hired caterers to help with the cooking, but Rose had insisted on making some dishes herself, and the blend of professional and homemade created a perfect meal. They went around the table sharing what they were thankful for. Sophie went first, her voice clear and certain. I'm thankful for Miss Bree calling me back when I called her. I'm thankful Daddy is happy again. And I'm thankful we're all here together. Rose went next. I'm thankful for family old and new. For second chances. For watching my son and granddaughter open their hearts again. Patricia's voice was thick with emotion when her turn came. I'm thankful that my daughter found people who see her value, who treat her with kindness. I'm thankful for all of you welcoming us into your home and your lives. Brianna felt tears prickling her eyes. I'm thankful for a 6-year-old girl who had the courage to call a stranger and ask for help. I'm thankful for this family, for feeling like I belong somewhere. And I'm thankful for love in all its forms. Andrew was last. He looked around the table at the faces of the people he loved most, then met Brianna's eyes. I'm thankful for Caroline, who taught me how to love, how to be a father, how to be a good man. I'm thankful that her love didn't end with her death but continues through Sophie. And I'm thankful for Brianna, who showed me that my heart isn't broken beyond repair, that loving again doesn't diminish what I had before. It just expands my capacity for happiness. There wasn't a dry eye at the table. After dinner, while Sophie, Patricia, and Rose settled in the living room to watch a movie, Andrew pulled Brianna aside to his study. I have something for you, he said, pulling a folder from his desk drawer. Brianna opened it, her eyes widening as she read. It was a contract with the Education Foundation, formalizing her role, outlining her responsibilities, and showing a salary that made her gasp. Andrew, this is too much. I'm only working part-time. It's market rate for an education consultant with your experience. I've had HR review it. Everything is above board and fair. Andrew's expression was serious. I wanted this formalized so there's never any question about whether you earned your position or your compensation. You're valuable, Brianna. Your work, your insights, your passion for education, they all have worth. I'm not doing you a favor. You're doing me one by helping build something that matters. Brianna looked at the contract, at the proof that she was more than just Andrew's girlfriend, that she had professional value separate from their relationship. It meant more than the salary itself. Thank you, she said softly, for seeing me as more than just someone you're helping. Always. Andrew stepped closer, his hands gentle on her waist. You've never been charity to me, Brianna. From the moment we met, you've been remarkable. They stood close for a moment, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Then Andrew spoke again, his voice lower, more vulnerable. There's something else I need to tell you. Something I've been thinking about for weeks but was afraid to say too soon. Brianna's heart raced. What is it? I'm not falling in love with you anymore. Andrew saw her face start to fall and quickly continued. I'm already there. I'm in love with you, Brianna Thompson. Completely, utterly, deeply in love. With your strength, your kindness, your laugh, the way you love Sophie, the way you make me want to be better. I love how you take your coffee with too much cream and how you hum when you're concentrating. I love that you remember little things people tell you and that you always see the best in people. I love you. Brianna felt tears streaming down her face. I love you too. I've been so scared to say it, to feel it, but I do. I love you, Andrew. I love your gentleness, your integrity, the way you honor Caroline while still being open to new love. I love watching you with Sophie, seeing the kind of father you are. I love that you fixed my life without making me feel small. I love you. Andrew cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other 4 months. But I also know what I want. And I want you, Brianna. In my life, in Sophie's life, forever if you'll have us. Is this a proposal? Brianna asked, her voice shaking. Not yet. Not officially. I want to do that right, with a ring and a plan. Andrew smiled. But it's a promise. A promise that when the time is right, when you're ready, I'm going to ask you to marry me. And I'm hoping, praying that you'll say yes. I'll say yes, Brianna whispered. I'm saying yes now, even before you officially ask. Yes to a future with you. Yes to being Sophie's stepmother. Yes to building a life together. Yes to all of it. Andrew kissed her then, deep and passionate, pouring all his love and hope and gratitude into the kiss. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. So we're doing this? Andrew asked. Really doing this? We're really doing this. Brianna laughed through her tears. We're building a family. They returned to the living room to find Sophie, Patricia, and Rose all pretending they hadn't been listening at the door. Sophie's face was glowing with joy, and she launched herself at both Andrew and Brianna. You're going to get married? Sophie asked eagerly. Eventually, yes, Andrew confirmed, ruffling his daughter's hair. When the time is right. And Miss Bree will be my new mom? Sophie looked at Brianna with hope and vulnerability in her eyes. I'll be your Brianna, Brianna said carefully, kneeling to Sophie's level. I won't try to replace your first mom. She'll always be your mom, and that's beautiful. But I'll love you like you're mine, and we'll figure out what that means together. Is that okay? Sophie threw her arms around Brianna's neck. That's perfect. I can love you both. There's room in my heart. Patricia wiped her eyes. My baby's getting married. Not yet, Mom, Brianna laughed. But someday soon. Rose raised her water glass. To family, to love, and to second chances. Caroline is smiling down on all of us today. They toasted, and as Brianna looked around at the faces of her new family, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. For months ago, she'd been facing eviction, joblessness, and despair. Now she was surrounded by love, building a future she'd never dared dream possible. Sophie's random phone call had changed everything. And as Thanksgiving Day turned into evening, with Sophie falling asleep between Andrew and Brianna on the couch, both adults knew that this was just the beginning of their story. The best chapters were still to come. 6 months passed in a blur of happiness and normalcy. Andrew and Brianna navigated their relationship with care and intention, building a foundation that would support a lifetime together. They had their first fight about whether pineapple belonged on pizza, their first makeup over ice cream and laughter, and countless small moments that wove their lives together. Brianna's work with the Education Foundation flourished. She developed programs that reached 12 schools in underprivileged neighborhoods, providing resources, teacher training, and student support. Her professional identity, separate from being Andrew's girlfriend, gave her confidence and purpose. Patricia's health had stabilized with better medical care that Andrew had insisted on providing through the foundation's employee health benefits. She'd moved into a small apartment near Brianna, close enough to visit but maintaining her independence. Rose and Patricia had become close friends, spending afternoons together planning and scheming. Sophie thrived, her personality blossoming as she adjusted to having Brianna as a constant presence. She'd started calling Brianna Bree instead of Miss Bree, a subtle but meaningful shift that acknowledged their evolving relationship. And through it all, Andrew and Brianna's love deepened. They learned each other's quirks and habits, fears and dreams. They learned how to communicate, how to support each other, how to blend their lives while maintaining their individual identities. It was a Saturday in late May when everything came together. Andrew had told Brianna they were taking Sophie to the park for a picnic. Nothing unusual or special. But when they arrived at Riverside Park, Brianna found it wasn't just any picnic. There was a pavilion decorated with flowers, a table set with real dishes, and Rose and Patricia waiting with knowing smiles. "What's going on?" Brianna asked, looking between them. Sophie grabbed her hand, practically vibrating with excitement. "It's a surprise. Come on, come on." They walked to the pavilion and Brianna saw more details. Fairy lights strung between trees even though it was daylight, a photographer discreetly positioned nearby, and a violinist playing soft music. Her heart started racing. Andrew led her to the center of the pavilion, Sophie beside them, holding a small box. "Brianna," Andrew began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "6 months ago I told you I loved you. That I wanted a future with you. That when the time was right I would ask you to marry me." Brianna's hands flew to her mouth as Andrew knelt down, Sophie kneeling beside him with a huge smile. "The time is right," Andrew continued. "We've built something beautiful together. You've brought joy back to my life, love back to my heart. You've been patient with my grief, gentle with Sophie, and brave enough to take a chance on us even when it scared you." Sophie opened the box, revealing a stunning ring, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, elegant and unique. "Brianna Thompson," Andrew said, his voice thick with emotion, "will you marry me? Will you be my wife, Sophie's mother, and my partner in building a life full of love and hope and happiness?" "Yes." Brianna was crying, laughing, nodding all at once. "Yes, yes, yes." Andrew stood, sliding the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then kissed her as Rose and Patricia cheered and Sophie danced around them. "I helped pick the ring," Sophie announced proudly. "Daddy said sapphires mean loyalty and truth, and I said that's perfect because that's what Bree is." Brianna knelt to hug Sophie, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, sweet girl. For everything. For that phone call, for believing in us, for being brave enough to hope." "I knew you were meant to be ours," Sophie said simply. "I knew from the first time we talked." The celebration continued with their small family eating, laughing and talking about wedding plans. Rose and Patricia had already conspired about dates and venues, though they promised to let Brianna and Andrew make the final decisions. "Summer wedding?" Rose suggested. "Give you time to plan but not so long you change your minds." "We're not changing our minds," Andrew said firmly, his arm around Brianna's waist. "I've never been more certain of anything." 3 months, Brianna said. "Late August. Is that enough time?" "It's perfect," Andrew agreed. 3 months of joyful chaos followed. Wedding planning with Sophie's enthusiastic input, tastings and fittings and decisions about flowers and music. Brianna and Andrew took premarital counseling seriously, talking through finances, parenting philosophies, and how to honor Caroline's memory while building their new family. On a warm Saturday in late August, surrounded by friends and family in a garden ceremony, Brianna Thompson became Brianna Mitchell. She wore a simple ivory dress, elegant and understated. Sophie served as flower girl in a dress the exact shade of maroon she'd requested, carrying a basket of rose petals with solemn dignity. Patricia cried through the entire ceremony. Rose smiled with satisfaction at a plan well executed by the universe. And Andrew looked at his bride like she was the answer to prayers he hadn't known how to form. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Sophie cheered loudly, and the assembled guests laughed with joy. At the reception, Andrew's business partner gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry. Patricia spoke about watching her daughter find happiness again after years of struggle. Rose shared memories of Caroline that honored the past while celebrating the future. Aunt Sophie, standing on a chair to reach the microphone, gave the final toast. I want to thank everyone for coming to my Daddy and Bree's wedding. 6 months ago I called Bree because Daddy was sad and I wanted to help. I didn't know if it would work, but I hoped really hard. And now we're all here and we're a family. Bree always says that love makes room for more love. That loving her doesn't mean I love my first mom less. It just means my heart got bigger. So thank you, Bree, for making our hearts bigger. And thank you, Daddy, for being brave enough to love again. And thank you, everyone, for believing in us. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. As the evening turned to night, with dancing and laughter and celebration, Brianna and Andrew stole a moment alone on the garden's edge. Happy? Andrew asked, pulling her close. Deliriously, Brianna confirmed. Sometimes I still can't believe this is real. That I went from facing eviction to standing here as your wife. That's the power of saying yes, Andrew said. You said yes to a random phone call from a child. You said yes to coming to a birthday party. You said yes to accepting help. You said yes to love. Each yes led you here. And you said yes to Sophie's matchmaking scheme. You said yes to taking a chance on me. Brianna rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Thank you for seeing me, for valuing me, for loving me. Always, Andrew promised. For the rest of our lives. They danced under the stars, watched by Sophie, who was supposed to be in bed but had snuck back out to see the first dance. She watched her daddy and her Bree, her new family, her answered prayers, and felt a sense of completeness she'd been missing since her first mom went to heaven. Love hadn't replaced love. It had expanded it. 6 months later, Brianna stood in the nursery she and Andrew had prepared, painting the walls a soft yellow. She was 4 months pregnant, glowing with health and happiness. Sophie had been overjoyed to learn she'd be a big sister, already planning how to teach the baby everything important. Need help? Andrew appeared in the doorway, smiling at the sight of his pregnant wife with paint in her hair. I've got it. But you can keep me company. Brianna continued painting, feeling Andrew's arms come around her from behind, his hands resting on her growing belly. Have I told you today that I love you? He murmured against her neck. Only about 5 times, Brianna teased. But I never get tired of hearing it. Good. Because I plan to tell you every day for the rest of our lives. Sophie bounded in, paint supplies in hand. Can I help? Please? Of course, Brianna said. You're the big sister. You should help make the baby's room perfect. As they painted together, the 3 of them becoming 4 soon, Brianna thought about the journey that had brought her here. From desperation to hope. From loneliness to family. From fear to love. One phone call from a determined 6-year-old had changed everything. Sophie's random dial had connected 2 broken people and started the healing process for a family. It had brought together a grieving widower, a struggling teacher, and a little girl who refused to give up on happiness. And now, as they prepared for a new life to join their family, Brianna understood that this was what Caroline had hoped for when she'd made Rose promise to encourage Andrew to love again. This continuation of family, this expansion of hearts, this proof that love never really ends, it just transforms. That evening, when the painting was done and Sophie was in bed, Andrew and Brianna sat on their bedroom balcony watching the stars. Do you think Caroline would approve? Brianna asked quietly. It was a question she'd asked before, but tonight it felt more important. I know she would, Andrew said with certainty. She loved Sophie more than anything. She'd be happy to see her thriving, excited about being a big sister, secure in a home full of love. And she'd be grateful to you for loving us both so well. I hope so, Brianna said. I hope she knows I honor her by loving Sophie, by teaching her about her first mom, by making sure she never forgets. She knows. Andrew pulled Brianna closer. And I think she probably had something to do with Sophie calling you that day. The odds of randomly dialing someone who was exactly what we needed, exactly when we needed them, that seems like more than coincidence. Brianna smiled. Maybe you're right. Maybe somewhere, somehow, she guided Sophie to me. Or maybe, Andrew said thoughtfully, kindness and hope and love are their own kind of compass. Maybe when you put those things out into the universe, they come back to you in unexpected ways. Through phone calls from 6-year-olds, Brianna added with a laugh. Exactly. They sat in comfortable silence, thinking about how far they'd come, how much they'd grown, how love had healed them both. The future stretched ahead, full of promise and possibility. A baby on the way, careers they loved, a family built on trust and respect and genuine affection. Sometimes, Brianna reflected, the best things in life came from being open to possibility. From saying yes when it would be easier to say no. From accepting help when pride urged self-sufficiency. From loving again when fear counseled protection. Sophie had understood that intuitively. At 6 years old, she'd known that hope was stronger than fear, that kindness mattered more than caution, that love was always worth the risk. And because of her courage, because of her determination to help her lonely father, 3 lives had been transformed. A grieving man had learned to love again. A struggling woman had found security and family. A little girl had gained a mother who cherished her. This was the power of hope, the magic of kindness, the beauty of love that refuses to give up. As Brianna drifted off to sleep that night, Andrew's arm around her, their baby moving gently inside her, Sophie sleeping peacefully down the hall, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. One phone call had changed everything. One little girl's hope had healed 3 hearts. One random act of courage had built a family. And that, Brianna thought as sleep claimed her, was the most beautiful love story of all. The end. 3 years later. Sophie Mitchell, now 9 years old, sat at her desk in her bedroom, her little brother Noah playing with blocks on the floor beside her. She was working on a school project about important moments in her life, and she'd chosen to write about the day she'd called Brianna. The most important phone call by Sophie Mitchell. 3 years ago, I did something that changed my whole life. I took my daddy's phone and called a random number. The person who answered was named Brianna, and she was nice to me even though I was a stranger. I invited her to my birthday party and she said yes. That decision brought our family together. Brianna married my daddy, and now she's my Brie. She didn't replace my first mom. She just added more love to our family. My teacher says that's how love works. It doesn't divide. It multiplies. Now I have a baby brother named Noah. Brie is having another baby in a few months. We're getting a dog next year. Our house is loud and messy and full of people I love. I learned that sometimes you have to be brave. Sometimes you have to try even when you're not sure it will work. And sometimes one phone call can change everything. The end. Sophie closed her notebook, satisfied. She looked at Noah, who was building a tower with his blocks, his face scrunched in concentration. He had Daddy's eyes and Brie's smile, and Sophie loved him with her whole heart. From downstairs, she heard Brie calling them for dinner, heard Daddy's laugh in response to something Brie said, heard Grandma Rose arriving with dessert. Sophie picked up Noah, balancing him on her hip the way Brie had taught her. Come on, buddy. Time for dinner. As they headed downstairs together, Sophie thought about that phone call 3 years ago, about how scared she'd been but how much she'd hoped. She'd wanted to fix her daddy's loneliness. She'd wanted her family to be happy again. She hadn't known it would work this well. But then again she'd learned something important. Kindness, hope, and love always lead somewhere beautiful. You just have to be brave enough to follow them. And Sophie Mitchell, matchmaker extraordinaire at age 6, family builder at age 9, had always been brave,